The NBA trade deadline is just over 2 weeks away, and the Heat have needs that need to be addressed even as they continue their winning ways. So we break down our dream trade targets, the player that could fit right in and help this team win this season without having to shake up the entire roster. All that and more on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, however you might be tuning in, YouTube, Odyssey, your favorite podcast app. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. All right, so we're doing our dream trade targets today. We've covered some of the role player type-ish names in the past. We've covered big names like John Collins and things like that. But today, David, you and I, we've got our dream target list here. We've got it ready to go, prepared. We're going to talk about them. But before we get to our names, just a brief explainer about what exactly is a dream target. Obviously, if we could just put Giannis or Kevin Durant on this roster, we would. But that's we're not like that's like more pipe dream. We're not talking about pipe dream targets. We're talking about something at least within the realm of realistic here, okay? So names that have been in sort of the trade rumor mill that make sense for this roster, players that might or could be moved, even if they're not really in the trade rumor mill lately, but could feasibly be traded before the deadline anyway, because we've always got those surprise players who were traded. So we'll do like our best guess on a couple of these too. So that's basically where we're at. So maybe not like Kevin Durant getting on the Miami Heat, but still like a couple all-star caliber type of players that we're going to talk about, right?
Yeah, and again, without, the way I looked at it is you don't have to gut your whole roster or whatever limited assets you have in order to acquire this player, which is what it would require for either like a Donovan Mitchell or Kevin Durant, which is why they weren't able to pull off those trades in the offseason. Miami's assets are limited. Like, not only do they not have the right kind of players, and as we've talked about before, you can't just trade away what you perceive. If you as a Heat fan don't like, say, Kyle Lowry or Duncan Robinson and their respective contracts, well, assume that 29 other GMs out there are going to say, you know what, I really like that 36-year-old Lowry at $29 million a year. They're not, That's not how they got that job. They're not that completely inept. They might make bad decisions, but that's not to say that they're going to go ahead and swing that trade just because you put it in the trade machine, and that's the way it works. So for me, it was just about seeing players that are plug-in, can contribute right away without having to gut the whole roster. And again, kind of dream-ish, big-ish names, not necessarily the big name that maybe some fans would like.
Right. Like we've done like the Naz Reid segment already. We love Naz Reid here, but he's not a dream target. So we're aiming higher than that, but not so high as far as, like getting one of the best three players in the NBA where it's not very realistic. You mentioned the assets. Just let's list them out real quick. Miami's got 3 first-round picks that they could feasibly move. They've got 3 second-round picks that they can move. And then we know the contracts that they have. Lowry at $28 million, not really a positive value contract. Duncan Robinson, $19 million, not really a positive value contract, but it's there. And then you got some of the other ones. Oladipo at $9 million. Caleb Martin at like $6.5 million. And then, of course, you've got the other minor ones. Tyler Herro, not tradable for all intents and purposes right now. So that's kind of what we're thinking about, too, is what Miami actually has in order to get these deals done. So dream targets that are somewhat realistic, I guess, is another way and a shorter way to explain it. Let's go with your first dream target name. David, we'll start with yours.
It's a player that you and I both liked entering the draft. Just felt like at the time Miami was looking for front court depth, but not necessarily at the center position, which is how they envisioned Bam Adebayo when they drafted him. And he was from that same draft, slipped a little bit lower because of some recurring knee issues during his collegiate career. And it's OG Anunoby, or Anunoby. Yes. Sorry, I always wind up mispronouncing that, but Anunoby. Look, we've heard from recent speculation that he is unhappy in Toronto, that he may want out of that system for whatever reason, whether it's because of Nick Nurse, because of the city, because of who knows. It's run its course. He's won a championship there. He's evolved into an incredible player, fantastic defensive player. promising young player with offensive growth over the last couple of seasons of his career. He started off the season shooting incredibly well from 3-point range. That's tapered off a little bit, but he's still a really competent 3-point shooter, has been able to put the ball down a little bit more. Very athletic, explosive even, just really great defender, and fits in. This is what I wasn't thinking from Miami's perspective. One, he's perfectly complementary to Bam Adebayo. I don't think it's also going to gut the roster in order to acquire him. You're part of our limitations for this exercise. But he fits right in. He's switchable, leads the league in steals, or he's one of the top steals getters in the NBA. Again, a good 3-point shooter. So the perfect guy that you could just put in at the 4. He can also play some minutes at the 5, which he has in Toronto. And he fits right in it. Championship experience, great player, not a locker room problem whatsoever. Fits, perfectly within Miami culture, Miami chemistry, and things of that sort. And I think he would be a really nice addition to the Heat roster.
So does 29 other NBA teams, apparently. He is the hot name on the market. We've already heard reports that Portland offered the number 7 pick for Anunoby during the draft, and obviously they didn't end up doing that. So this is just Memphis has been talked about as a landing spot for him. There are so many teams that can use it. He is just basically your prototypical 3-and-D kind of player. Now, the 3 part, I don't really know if I buy the shot. You mentioned the numbers before. He started off shooting really well. That's obviously come down. I think he's settled in right around 33-34%. That's not great. 36. Okay, that's probably where he'll be. I don't think he'll ever be that much better. He'll probably be 36 to 38% 3-point shooter, which is good, especially. And look, he was getting some Defensive Player of the Year buzz early on. Now that's kind of died down a little bit, but he's a really, really good perimeter defender. Now, he'll never be Kawhi Leonard, right? And I know that Toronto fans sort of looked at him, he could, and he drew some Kawhi comparisons. I don't think he'll be that. Best case scenario is he'll be Jaylen Brown. But Jaylen Brown's a really good player. He's going to probably start in the All-Star game this year. That's a really good player, but he's not somebody that can create his own shot. He's not, I don't know that you really want him shooting at the end of games, even though he's probably more streaky. But still, if you're the Heat and you've got the guy that you want shooting at the end of games in Tyler Herro, long-term, Tyler Herro, you've got Bam Adebayo, you've got guys who can create plays and play make for others. You don't really need another one of those guys. So you look at a guy like Anunoby here who could play off of them, make the open shots that he's going to be getting, and play defense at a high level, hustle, get rebounds, do all that kind of Miami Heat stuff. I like it a lot. And in terms of what it would cost, we're hearing reports that Toronto doesn't even want to entertain Anunoby offers, that they're committed to him. Whatever. Maybe that's posturing. Maybe it's not. The conversation that I keep hearing is it's going to be 2 first-round picks minimum. They're 2 unprotected picks minimum, or a very lightly protected picks to start talking about Anunoby. But if 20 other teams are trying to get him, right, and the entry price just to be in the conversation, just to have a long phone call with Masai Ujiri is 2 first-round picks, then to actually get Anunoby would probably take a 3rd first-round pick. Well, luckily Miami has 3 first-round picks, so it's not going to gut their roster per se. They could throw some salaries together and get those 3 first-round picks to get him, but it would gut basically everything that they could trade for quite a while in order to acquire Anunoby. So you've got to be really committed to and believe that this is the guy that you want to pair next to Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo long term.
I think it makes a lot of sense too. I think you've got.
I'm not saying that that's not the case. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I wasn't saying it wasn't the case, but yeah, go ahead.
No, I know. But from the Heat fan perspective, I think the superstar trade, those are, as you mentioned, pipe dreams. They're very unrealistic. And while I don't think Miami is necessarily limited to not exploring those down the road, you make a trade for this year because your window is closing. The team is eventually going to have to shift from a Jimmy Butler led group to the younger core of Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro, assuming you don't have to give up either of them to acquire any of the players that we're talking about today. But regardless, for this season, you can continue winning. Like we were just talking about before we started recording, Miami now in the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference, just 2 games behind Cleveland. And they're going to be able to continue to move up the way they've been winning, whether it's by virtue of catching teams while they're injured or in bad situations or whatever. It doesn't matter. You've got to continue to win games. And Miami has shown that once they get in the playoffs, they can be a dangerous group regardless. And Anunoby, again, is a player who can fit fit right in and help out in that regard. And this could be your core for the next few years, 3-4 seasons of competing at a very high level.
Oh, yeah, with Jimmy Butler. And then once Jimmy walks away, then you've got those three, Anunoby, Bam, and Tyler Herro. And then those guys, theoretically, at the very least, work really well together. The other part, too, is that if for some reason you want to pivot into a superstar deal, and look, oh man, we've already traded all three of our first round picks. We don't have what it takes to go get Damian Lillard, or whoever it is that becomes available, right? Every team wants Anunoby. We already established that. So you could put him and let's call it Tyler Herro together. That's a really good trade package. And maybe there's teams out there that don't necessarily even want the first round picks. They'll say, hey, you're giving us two young, cornerstone, blue chip type of players in exchange for maybe our aging veteran. Maybe that's also something that would be available to them. Just because you trade for him doesn't mean you can't turn around and trade that same player. I don't know.
Does that group, let's say whatever it takes to require OG, is that enough to win in the Eastern Conference? It's enough
to win a lot of games in the Eastern Conference. If you're talking about Herro, Anunoby, and Bam, let's call it 3 years from now. Jimmy Butler's on the tail end of whatever this is. But the team is based around those three. I don't know that that's better than Giannis and whatever he has. I don't know that it's better than I don't know.
That's the thing, though. Like, I wasn't even looking that far ahead. I was saying this season. Like, I think with Anunoby and Bam on the roster, you've got two of your premier switch defenders along the perimeter.
I still have issues with. I don't know that if you add Anunoby to this roster, that the Heat are any better than 26 in offensive rating, which is where they're at now. That would be my one concern. It makes you maybe a top 3 defense in the league, where right now Miami's 6, I think, the last I checked.
And so
it makes you a lot better defensively, no doubt. But I don't know that it improves anything meaningfully offensively. And that would be my problem, at least for this year. That would be my concern.
Fair enough.
The Heat do need three-point shooting. It's something we've talked a lot about. Who better than one of the best three-point shooters of the last half decade will tell you who it is and how they can get him next. But first, David, tell listeners about our sponsor.
Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sports book in America. That's right, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's even better because they have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers can join today and get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make sure you use that /lockedon. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at the bigger payout with a same-game parlay. Of course, the NFL Conference Championships coming up this weekend should be a good opportunity for you to make a little extra money on the side here, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet and get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Locked On Heat is also available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please subscribe. And thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. All right, so we already did your dream target, OG Anunoby. Let's go to mine.
All right.
One of the best three-point shooters of the last half decade in the NBA.
They've already got that guy in the roster. Duncan Robinson, right? Is that what you're talking about? No,
okay.
Never mind.
Buddy Hield. So, look, behind Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Damian Lillard, Buddy Hield has basically been the premier three-point shooter in the league for the last half decade, right? He's a career 40% three-point shooter. He's making 42% on 9 attempts this year. When you're talking about spacing the floor, when you're talking about what the Miami Heat are doing right now, which is basically Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo pick and roll, Jimmy Butler in the dunker spot. And that is essentially their offense. And you're asking guys like Strus and Caleb and Gabe, Duncan when healthy, like all these guys, even Kyle Lowry basically has been marginalized to the point of, hey, space the floor around those 3 guys. None of them have been doing it at a very high level. As we know, the Heat went from #1 in the league last year in three-point percentage to one of the worst 5 teams in the league in three-point percentage. So what better way to fix that than to just go get one of the best three-point shooters in the league right now in Buddy Hield, who's doing it on such a high volume. He's got such gravity from 30 feet. Like, the guy is one of the best catch-and-shoot three-point shooters we've seen in the last decade in the NBA. He would have nothing but space available or open shots available to him. He would be creating space for all the other guys that we were just talking about. We talked about John Collins earlier this week, or maybe it was last week. I don't remember. And sort of the package that it would take to get John Collins. And the one that has been rumored and reported that's out there is Duncan Robinson, Caleb Martin, and a first-round pick. So that got me thinking, all right, well, let's say Miami called up Atlanta and offered Duncan Robinson, Caleb Martin, and a first-round pick for John Collins, and the Hawks declined. Well, then where else could you take that package? What other teams could you call with that same package? And the one that immediately came to mind was the Pacers. Caleb Martin makes a lot of sense for them. Duncan Robinson under a longer-term contract than Buddy Hield is, and a first-round pick could be valuable to them. And if they're committed to moving on from Buddy Hield because they don't think that he's part of their long-term plans, then maybe that is something that makes sense for them. I don't know. Do you have to throw in a Nikola Jovic? Maybe, but that's a different kind of conversation. In terms of Buddy Hield's fit, I think he's an optimal dream target here. He's making $20.5 million this year. He's making $18.5 million next year. So just from a salary cap perspective, it makes sense for Miami because you're paying him less money next year when all those extensions start to kick in. So that's valuable. And then you're talking about a core four of Tyler Herro, Buddy Hield, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo. Is Kyle Lowry a part of that? Maybe. Do you go out and acquire more of a traditional power forward, and then it's Herro, Hield, Butler, that power forward, and Bam? That to me makes a lot of sense. I think that Buddy Hield allows you that flexibility, and more importantly, like I just said, the biggest problem that the Heat have this year is offense. The biggest problem with their offense is the lack of three-point shooting, making shots that are available and open to them. They have no problem creating those shots. You got to get a guy who can knock those shots down. Few people do it better than Buddy.
From an offensive perspective, he's a great fit. You're right in that Miami would probably have to make some kind of a secondary move in order to shore up their front court, right? It just makes a lot of sense. I think you're still going to be somewhat undersized, and maybe you can lean opposite of what this team has been. You know, with OG, I think you're kind of embracing the defensive perspective. Say, look, we might not score 100, but we know you're not, and that's fine. Like what was the mentality when they acquired Kyle Lowry and PJ Tucker last year? Is like, we don't know what we're going to get offensively, but we're going to beat you up and make things difficult for you defensively. Conversely, now we get a much more open floor game. We know that Spo loves that. He loves defense because, that's Heat culture, et cetera. But at the same time, when the offense is clicking, you got those 3-point shots falling. It's a beautiful game. And I think he can do enough, offensively with the right schemes to get Buddy those open looks. And to your point, get Jimmy, Bam, et cetera, driving towards the rim or occupying space in the paint, and all of a sudden you kick it open to a wide open Buddy Hield. That's beautiful. I mean, that sounds great.
I don't think that the defense would drop off that much. The half court defense would, but if you're just
he's
talking about
he's not a great one-on-one defender, but he can be a great help defender.
He's a better help defender. One-on-one would be the issues in the playoffs. Teams with ball handlers who are predatorial can attack him and they can still attack Tyler Herro when it really matters too. Even though Tyler has definitely improved there. But I do think that there's something to be said about the Heat missing so many shots that they're defending in transition a lot. And if you're making shots at a much higher rate, then at least you're able to settle into your defense a little bit more. And there might, so I think there'll be a drop-off defensively if you were to make a move and start Tyler Herro and Buddy Hield in the backcourt. I just don't think it would be as precipitous as it might look at first blush. We already mentioned, so we're talking about Buddy Hield as a three-point shooter. I know your next dream target is also a three-point shooter.
Yeah, that's my thought process was somebody else in that front court position that you could come in. He could fill in as, if not, he's definitely not a better defender than Caleb Martin, the current starting four, but at least he's a body that you could put in there at that spot, and you're not giving up much in terms of size. And he fits more of the MO of what Miami tends to do at the trade deadline in terms of being an older player, somebody who's got playoff experience, but also addresses several needs. That's Bojan Bogdanovic. Yeah. Obviously, no stranger to the rumor trade mill. He's the trade rumor mill, excuse me. He's a name that's been frequently floated out there. I think the latest reports are that Detroit wants a first round pick, an unprotected first round pick,
yes,
and along with matching salary and a decent young player, things of that sort. So I think he's gettable. I think somebody's going to be making that trade for him just because he just doesn't fit into the Pistons long term. They signed him to a pretty decent extension when he first joined the team earlier this year, and they I think that made it a little bit easier to grease the wheels of a trade because he's already under contract. You're not going to be just acquiring a rental or anything like that. So you're again committing, if you're Miami, to this core of Jimmy, Bam, and now Bogdanovic here. But I mean, to say he's a great 3-point shooter is an understatement.
Yes.
For an anemic 3-point offense in Miami, you're getting an incredible boost. And Bogdanovic, again, the right size, position of need. He's a turnover monster, but mostly because he has the ball in his hands, is because he's whipping these Euro-style offensive passes to players that just aren't ready and expecting it. So I think those would cut down a little bit in Miami. I think he'd be just the right fit in terms of that offense. Again, with Hield, more of a catch and shoot guy, but I think you could put Bogdanovic in that same possibility as well. Again, the same type of offense that we were talking about, and you flare it out to a wide open Bogdanovic, and he's a knockdown shooter, playoff experience, something that Hield does not have. So I think that would be.
No, you're right. And more readily just sort of slots in there, because if you're thinking about a lineup, it would be Kyle Lowry, Tyler Herro, Jimmy Butler, Bogdanovic, and Bam, right? And that makes a lot of sense. On paper, it works. And by the way, Bogdanovic, not a terrible defender. I think he sort of has a reputation as being a really bad defender. He's not
in European,
he's not
that'll do it right away.
Yeah, he's not making an all-NBA defensive team anytime ever, but he can hold his own. He can hold his own. He's got good size. There's stuff there that works. He could be a better rebounder, but in terms of no,
Miami,
right?
They don't really care,
right? And look, he's not a perfect player. We're not saying it, but he's a 20-point per game scorer, knockdown 3-point shooter, somebody you have to respect. And if you put him in the corner, man, that is creating so much space for that Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo pick and roll. It's creating space on the baseline for Jimmy Butler to hang out. It's an ideal fit. To your point, what's really the price? Or like there's reporting out there that the Pistons don't even really want to move him, that they like him. Considering that he's under contract for next year, I get it. Like they should not be in a rush. Whatever first round pick kind of assortment that they can get now for Bojan Bogdanovic, they can get next year for Bojan Bogdanovic, right? Like that, they're going to get a first round pick if they decide to trade him, whenever they decide to trade him, as long as he's under contract. But if you're
barring an injury, right? That's
that would be the only thing, or some sort of like steep drop in production. And that's why I kind of think that that stuff is a little like why hold. I get that he's a good player and that you're trying to build good habits and stuff for the Pistons, but like really, like if somebody doesn't offer you a solid young player and a first round pick for Bogdan, you're really gonna hold on. I just don't see it. I think that he could actually be gettable before the deadline. So
I think that stuff is so overblown too. Like, I mean, again, within the culture of the NBA, acquiring a veteran European player in his first season with the team, this isn't Udonis Haslem. It's not like he's that voice in the locker room either. He doesn't have the kind of power to tell these young guys like Sadiq Bey and everybody else how to play the right way.
Right, he just got there. Yeah, he just got there. And they keep talking about Alec Burks the same way. And look, the more people you talk to, the more they're kind of saying, you know what, the Pistons, like the more you talk to people in the Pistons, they're really serious about kind of wanting to hold on to these guys. And look, the flip side of that is what the Houston Rockets are doing, and that's just building bad habits. So I get it. Like, you want good players in the locker room who have been around. Bogdanovic has been around. He's been in a lot of playoff situations, to your point. Alec Burks, ditto. But it's like there's a price for everybody is my ultimate point. And I think that price could be there for the Pistons at some point.
What about,
is it the Miami Heat?
Just for example, like a first, Jovic and maybe Caleb Martin, is that too much to give up for Bogdanovic?
He's making like a lot. You would have to throw Duncan Robinson in there, wouldn't you, for salary?
Maybe you're right. Yeah, maybe you're right.
So I was thinking the same package. It's like Duncan, Caleb, and a first, and maybe you have to throw in Jovic. It's a lot.
That is a lot. That is a lot.
But if the Heat wanted it, it's there, and that's sort of the point of this exercise. All right, probably there, we should say. Not reporting anything. All right, coming up, a name I guarantee you have not heard in connection with the Heat, but could be more gettable than you expect. That's coming up next here on Locked On Heat. Reach Locked On Heat on Twitter, Instagram, email us, lockedonheat@gmail.com. All right, so before we get to the final name here, which I think is a surprise name that could excite Heat fans, but also might, I don't know, we'll see. Before we do that, some honorable mentions first and some previous mentions. We already mentioned John Collins, and we did a whole show about John Collins. If you haven't checked it out, do check it out. I feel like I convinced myself more over the course of doing that episode with you, David, that
Absolutely.
I'm like all the way in on John Collins. If we're going to talk about real dream targets, I don't know that anybody that I listed here is more of a dream target for me personally than John Collins is. If you want to know why, again, check out that episode. But since we already did the whole episode on John Collins, I didn't want to also talk about him too much here. The other one would be Harrison Barnes. We talked about him in the preseason. He is exactly what this Miami Heat team needs. Unfortunately, the Kings ain't trading him anymore. He's really good for them. The Kings are really good. They're third in the Western Conference or something. Yeah. Like last I checked.
Off limits. That just goes to show how quickly these things can change.
Yeah.
Like if you had said that Harrison Barnes was untouchable in a trade 6 months ago, people would have laughed at your face. But now, like, he's become essential to the Kings' success.
Yeah, he was sort of like John Collins and Miles Turner over the last few years. Just preeminently always on the trade block. And then all of a sudden he just wasn't anymore. And you're like, oh, wow, the Sacramento Kings are good. And I love that the Sacramento Kings are good. Great story. Stay up for those West Coast games, folks. I thought about Norman Powell.
You want to just go back and get those cookies at the Golden One
really
Star. That's all
the best oatmeal raisin cookies, man. Next credit cookies we got to do with the Sacramento Kings oatmeal raisin cookies.
Next time they play Sacramento, if they win.
If they probably won't. Nobody beats the Kings anymore. I thought about Norman Powell. Didn't really kind of hit the Richter scale of dream target for me, though. 43% three-point shooter on 4.6 attempts this year. Good rebounder, solid defender, good size.
Yeah.
If you're going to trade Kyle Lowry to the Clippers, a framework that you and I have talked enough about already on this show, getting Norman Powell back would sort of maybe be the ideal guy to get back in that deal. But again, not really hitting that dream target kind of register for me.
Marcus Morris too. Also.
Yeah, like Marcus Morris
is Kennard.
Not really hitting that level. Here's a guy that does, though. It's a 3-teamer. Because you knew I couldn't get out of a podcast without giving you a 3-team trade.
Oh, can I give you some of my honorable mentions?
Oh, yeah,
as well?
yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's cool. I've got Kyle Kuzma in there.
Okay.
I think that's one that's gettable. Also, maybe not getting trade, dream scenario, but I think
I don't love the Kuzma fit in Miami. If I'm being honest, he's not a great two ball dominant, not a great 3-point shooter. He's only shooting like 33%. From 3
I thought it was higher this season, to be honest.
It was, and then it's dropped off. He's a little streaky. He wants to do stuff with the ball in his hands, and I don't know that works. Like, I actually think because he loves to just sort of catch the ball in the perimeter and then drive into the paint and do his like little spin moves for Instagram, that it almost is the opposite of a floor spacer. He kind of clogs the paint because he likes to occupy that space. So I don't love the Kuzma. I know Kuzma's been out there for basically every fan base, sort of like Bogdanovic has. I don't love the fit in Miami for him.
And there's also the personal aspect regarding his relationship with Tyler Herro. So that's something to consider. Yes. I mean, you do want to blow up the good chemistry.
Too. Yeah.
That's
potentially shouldn't. So I'm not reporting that there's any conflict there, but yeah.
Right. Well, I mean,
one could imagine.
That's it. We don't want to be rumor mongers here, but yes, it's probably going to be a bad situation. Having said that, I also got Brandon Ingram as a gettable target. I think.
You think he's gettable?
I think so. I think the fact that they're continuing to win without him and his injury history and everything else like that, I think you can lean into Zion and CJ McCollum. And if you get just the right kind of wing depth and experience and shore up different positions.
They already have Herb Jones and Trey Murphy the third there. So maybe if you're, but that would be like 3 unprotected picks. Jovic, Caleb Martin would probably have to be a part of that just to sort of shore up the wing depth for New Orleans and whatever salary, I guess. It's going to cost that's Brandon Ingram at this point it might not be a Donovan. It might be like a DeJounte Murray level worth of stuff to get him.
It's interesting. Yeah, no, it's certainly possible. But to your point, I think you mentioned it earlier. There is going to be a name that nobody expects to get traded that's going to be traded at this point, just because something behind the scenes in terms of their fit. I don't think anybody would have reported 2 weeks ago that OG was unhappy in Toronto, and now we're starting to hear more and more of that, and other people coming up and supporting this kind of talk. So there's always something back there. There have been talks about a lot of these players and players that we haven't even mentioned today behind the scenes. So it's going to be a big one. Again,
Brandon Ingram for Jimmy Butler.
Whoa. Ooh.
Just throwing it out there. No. One other name that I thought of sort of in the same regard of not on the block now, but like project a few months later. Is it crazy? Paul George? Would it be?
I considered it.
Right?
I did consider it.
I thought about it. I thought it was just a little too off the wall right now. It also, we're also talking about this deadline, and that would never happen this deadline. But over the summer, if this goes the way it kind of looks like it's going to go for the Clippers right now, can they really afford to hold on to that
press conference? Yeah, I could see it. Playing against him as a young player in Indiana, I knew this was a respected franchise, and now I want to bring my talents here so I can help them continve their winning ways.
It's a Jimmy Butler thing again. Just put him and Jimmy together, It's the teams that LeBron beat, the big three Heat beat. All right.
Is Kevin Garnett still available? Sorry.
Any other? He's available to do any commercial that you have. Any other honorable mentions?
So are we. So we can't really throw stones here. You know.
That's very true. Any other honorable mentions before we move on to my last dream target?
Is PJ Washington dream-ish? I don't know. Like
I don't like the fit either. I know that's a name that's been out there with Heat fans for a couple of years now. I don't love that fit. He's not as good of a three-point shooter from the corners as people think he is. He's not good. He's a fine defender. So here's my PJ Washington theory. If he were 6'8", or let's call it 6'10", if he were 6'10", I think his trade value would actually be less than it is now as a 6'7" guy, because he's 6'7", so he kind of gives off that like Draymond Green, PJ Tucker school, like strong but like stocky but strong power forward that everybody sort of wants and can like. And you think those guys can play make and they can shoot and there's stretch fours from the corners and all that. Like that's not really his game. He's kind of a finesse four. Like he likes to dribble into the little floaters and like kind of finesse hook shots off of 1 foot and stuff. Like that's kind of more.
Not bad. It's not bad though. Like I mean, you're right.
I know, but like that's what Bam already does. So what you don't.
You're right.
You don't need. I don't mind. I think PJ Washington's a fine player. I don't like the fit for Miami, and so I just don't think he's like hitting that. So if you were like 6'10", I think he would be more like Jalen McDaniels for Charlotte and kind of valued in that way than he is right now. I just think that people look at him and they're like, oh, because he also can't do any playmaking.
Yeah,
like that's fair. He's like a worse Grant Williams. Like Grant Williams will at least get hot from the corners and make like 40% of his threes over a 3-week period. Like PJ Washington doesn't really do that. So I get it. I don't know. I'm just not in on PJ, and especially if it's going to cost a draft pick, like a first-round pick. That's too much for me.
You can't send Caleb back. Send Caleb back so he can play with his brother Cody.
Caleb Martin's a better player than PJ Washington. Why would I do that?
No, I mean, I'm just saying. Like I think like something feels. You know, the more we talk about this and the more they keep winning, the more unsurety there is around the league. I was responding to somebody on Twitter a couple of days ago because it's just, you know, there seems like there's so much parity, and this is statistically proven, more parity than there has been in decades in the NBA. Yeah. And given that, I don't look at any team and say, oh, they're a shoo-in. Boston's gettable. The Nets are gettable. The Sixers have been really, really good. I don't have any faith that they're going to keep it together to play us with James Harden and Joel. You fart in the wrong direction. He's out for 6 to 8 weeks. Embiid, as good as he is, I don't know that there's any team that's like such a powerhouse. This isn't the big three. This isn't this isn't the Golden State Warriors. There's no dynastic team out there.
There's no perfect team.
Fear in the hearts of
the 27. I just wrote it today for a piece that's coming out later this week. The 2017 Warriors ain't walking through that door. Like I agree with you. So what's your point? Like a minor trade like this could mean the difference?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe. I don't think PJ Washington's the guy, but to your overall point, look, I think that's why I actually think this trade deadline is going to be pretty interesting because I think there's going to be teams, even if it's just like no major landmark trades, I think there'll actually be quite a bit of just sort of shuffling deck chairs. Hey, this guy's not the perfect fit. Let's move him for might be a more ideal fit. Just something minor like that, a minor tweak like that could send you over there. One last honorable mention that I had was Serge Ibaka. I just don't see that play. I don't see him being gettable. I also
that is a trade. What is that? A buyout candidate? Absolutely.
Serge Ibaka? Oh, I'm sorry. What am I talking about? Not Serge Ibaka. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Pascal Siakam. Okay. I was looking at my paper from the other day. I still have Serge Ibaka written here. Pascal Siakam was the other name that I was thinking about. Dream targets we're doing. Not the role player ones. That was really good. That was another show.
I don't think he's gettable either.
Pascal Siakam, I don't know that it's gettable right now. It feels like maybe Fred VanVleet and OG are the guys that, if anybody's going to get traded from Toronto, those are kind of the guys. Siakam might be a down the road thing. If anything.
All right, let's get to your big trade suggested here.
After all those big names like Paul George and Pascal Siakam, could I interest you in one Cameron Johnson? This was so anticlimactic.
No, listen. I think it's a good name. Like, and again, within the scheme of what we're talking about here, the context of a gettable player who can make an immediate impact, and you can also continue to build in the future. Yeah, I like Cam Johnson's fit.
Power forward, floor spacer, fits in right with what Miami wants. He's 6'8", 6'10" wingspan, 26 years old. Shot 42.5% last year from three, 44.1% this year from three. Just now coming back from that injury that kept him out for a long time. Here's the deal. I got a 3-teamer for you. Miami gets Cameron Johnson, our old friend Jay Crowder, and Dario Saric back.
Ooh.
They send to Minnesota Kyle Lowry and Dwayne Dedmon.
Okay.
Phoenix trades D'Angelo Russell, not to Miami, but to Phoenix. We've got reporting this week that the Suns are considering their post-Chris Paul future. I think some people are reading that wrong. I think some people are they going to trade Chris Paul? I don't think I'm reading it that way. I think they're looking, okay, what's our plan at point guard after Chris Paul? You could bring in D'Angelo Russell if you're the Phoenix Suns. You could play Chris Paul, D'Angelo Russell, and Devin Booker together. There's no reason why you couldn't. You can have D'Angelo Russell apprentice under Chris Paul. D'Angelo Russell and Devin Booker are best friends, just like D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns are best friends. So D'Lo will just continue that tour around the NBA playing with his friends. And I actually think that it would work in Phoenix. D'Angelo Russell, say it will, been pretty efficient shooting this year. He's a good pick and roll ball handler. Defensively, he's not that good. He's been a little bit better this year, but he's still not great. He's a little too streaky. You don't necessarily want the ball in his hands when the game really matters most, but that's why you have Devin Booker. And so if D'Angelo Russell's going to be like cool with giving the ball up, he'll probably be cooler with giving it to Booker than he would Anthony Edwards. Booker also proven in a way that Anthony Edwards isn't. So I don't know. I think that makes sense for Phoenix. You got your point guard of the future ostensibly in D'Angelo Russell. Minnesota, they're getting a point guard that more makes sense for them in Kyle Lowry. Dwayne Dedmon's in there for salary matching purposes. And then Miami, look, you get Jay Crowder. He could play for you, obviously, off the bench. Dario Saric is at least a backup 5 option there. And then Cameron Johnson's really the centerpiece of that deal. Like I said, 26 years old. He'll be a restricted free agent this year. You trade for him now so that you could re-sign him. And in terms of, okay, it's Bam, it's Tyler, and Cameron Johnson. Cameron Johnson makes a lot of sense as sort of that third player. I wouldn't call that as a big 3. I don't know that Cameron Johnson will ever be a player that's deserving of being part of a big 3. But in terms of just players that fit next to your core group, he does.
Yeah, definitely. Not big 3 material yet. Although maybe there's potential for him there. The irony there would be that you're including Crowder in a trade, specifically when he was so pissed off about having to get sent to the bench behind Cam Johnson, and then he's traded them both to the same team. It's like, hey, guess what? You're still coming off the bench. So this might be a 4-teamer where you have to find yet another
Jay Crowder to Milwaukee for like Pat Connaughton.
Oh, Grayson Allen, right?
Or Grayson Allen, or whatever. One of those.
Oh, Miami would be the most hated team by far if they acquire another Duke player like Grayson Allen too. That would be
feels like it almost has to happen then.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point on the Jay Crowder, but yeah.
I like it. It seems like I feel like Phoenix is the team that's most unlikely to agree to that because it's like, hey, take 3 of our forwards and our forward depth here, but sure, why not? At the same time, you're getting.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. You're getting Russell, who I think is important to start planning ahead. And if you want to commit to your star player, your cornerstone and Booker, then bringing one of his best friends aboard is probably a good way of doing it.
You actually could start both Crowder and Cam Johnson, and move Jimmy Butler to shooting guard and Tyler Herro to point guard. Have Bam at center, obviously.
That would work if you trade Kyle too.
Yeah, if you're trading Kyle in that deal, you're gonna need somebody to slide over instead of Oladipo, Gabe Vincent, and Caleb Martin off the bench, and Dario Saric apparently.
All right, make it happen.
All right, that'll do it for our dream targets. What are your dream targets? Let us know in the comments here on YouTube. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to Locked On Heat wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Now make your second listen game-to-game NBA, every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We will be back on Friday with our preview of Miami's first game against Orlando Magic with Philip Rossman-Reich from Locked On Magic. You want to check that out. And that's it. Thanks for joining me, David.
You got it, Wes.